Hi there, it's Kim Flores. Just wanted to follow up, and I hope your class is going well so far. And now I really wanted to talk about what it really looks like to engage young people in evaluation. I always like to start with a definition of evaluation overall because I think so often we think of evaluation as one tool or one instrument rather than an entire study. And so the definition I really like to use is one that was adapted from Michael Quinn Patton. Um, and it defines evaluation as involving the thoughtful, systematic collection of data. And I like to highlight that. There's lots of different ways to gather data, and people talk about having anecdotal data all the time. And sometimes what they really mean is qualitative, but what we really need to focus on is how do we gather data over and over again in a systematic way, no matter if it's qualitative or quantitative. So, really looking for ways to systematize data collection. You'll note here that evaluation includes the analysis of information. The reason that that's so important is I think often we're gathering data, and we don't step back to really take time to analyze it and make meaning of the data so that we can put it to use, which is the next part of this definition, that evaluation is supposed to be used, unlike other kinds of research that may be useful at a knowledge production level, but that may not be as useful immediately to the people that are the stakeholders of the work. And it's supposed to be used to reduce uncertainties, improve the effectiveness of our work, and make decisions regarding the kinds of programs that we're using. So I just put that out there as the working definition that I have in mind always as I'm thinking about evaluation. And then we want to think about, well, what is youth participatory evaluation? And it really engages young people in the process of evaluating the programs, organizations, agencies, and systems that have been designed to serve them. And this is a little bit different than perhaps youth participatory action research, where they're maybe doing a study on the conditions that they live in or other kinds of issues like issues of equity or justice in their community so that they can take action. Evaluation is really focused in on a program, organization, agency, or system that's really been designed to serve them or provide services to them. It also can be a program that they themselves have created that they want to evaluate and look at. And of course, this can be completely youth-driven, or it can be conducted in partnerships with adults, or also youth-led completely. But the big point here is that youth are not merely respondents of a method created by adults, nor consultants on an adult-led evaluation. They're actually evaluators themselves that are creating knowledge, shaping their own evaluation questions, developing their own unique methods for addressing or answering these questions, and analyzing and interpreting the data that's been gathered, and also reporting their findings. So really, you can have them involved in any one of these, but ideally for a full participatory method, young people really should be engaged in all levels of evaluation. And I really want to introduce Roger Hart's ladder participation here. So for me, I always think of that top ladder really being shared decision with adults. And the reason I think that's so important here, and it's interesting that Roger puts that above child-led entirely. And I think it's really important because oftentimes young people in evaluation really need us as adults to act as allies and champions for the work. And they need to be able to rely on us to open doors, to make sure their voices are heard, to make sure they're getting a seat at the table. So that adult partnership with young people is highly important at the top level because without us, they wouldn't be able perhaps to gain as much power as they might be able to if we were also coming to the table, working alongside them, and working as allies in their efforts. So why do youth-led evaluation? Well, obviously my personal story today told you a lot about why I think it's an incredibly important endeavor. But also, when we engage young people in the very beginning of their projects or programs, when they're designing a community service project, when they're engaging in a youth-led um, program or project in their community, it really allows them to begin thinking about where they're heading and how they're going to get there from the very beginning. It allows them to think about their long-term goals, identify their activities, and create measurable short and medium-term outcomes. It also increases the effectiveness of the projects and programs that we're working in to serve young people. It also transforms youth-adult relationships. And this is really important. It's not only the youth-adult relationships between you and the young people that you're working with, but it's also the adults in the community. One of the biggest outcomes that young people have talked to me about when they're doing this work is that when they are in these leadership roles in the community, that adults in governance begin to see them differently. Sometimes adults just within the grocery stores who are often looking at youth to throw them out of the grocery store for hanging out, don't throw them out anymore and begin to talk to young people and know them on a different level and as leaders within the community. So it fundamentally transforms the youth-adult relationship. It also engages youth in developing the social, cultural, and political environments necessary for them to continue to grow and develop in. And I mentioned this earlier, but as youth really engage in evaluating the programs and services in their community, they begin to shift them, changing them, and updating them to the current norms that young people have and the current kinds of needs that young people have. So they begin to develop and change the context of these kinds of services and programs. It helps young people tell their stories in a very unique way. So often we as evaluators are given the opportunity to tell young people's stories rather than them telling their stories or self in their own words. Obviously, I mentioned earlier, it increases their social emotional learning, which we know is so important to long-term gains and thriving. It promotes a critical consciousness and an ongoing civic engagement, which is really important to engage young people as young as we can in the civic context. So where do you start when you're doing an evaluation with young people? Again, I think you should start from the very beginning of planning any youth-led project, but sometimes that's not always possible. Sometimes you have to start, once initiative is up and going, specifically in the context when youth are evaluating a program that they're in or a service that's out in the community for them. But one of the first things I like to do when engaging youth in evaluation is get them engaged in a conversation about what is evaluation. So often I create a human survey where I have different points in the room be different responses. Sometimes it's a scale from I love it a lot to I hate it. So I might ask the young people to line up from I love evaluation to I hate evaluation and ask them, why they're standing in those spots or why they're standing next to the I love evaluation or I hate evaluation or anywhere in between. And the reason I do this is because while they're standing there, I can ask them, well, what is it about evaluation that you like so much? Or what is it about evaluation that you don't care for? And what we've learned over time is that how young people understand evaluation and how they see it is wildly different than how we do. So for example, I worked with a group of young people with disabilities, and I discovered very quickly that their definition of evaluation really had to do with an assessment of their abilities and categorizing them or labeling them or so that they could diagnose the youth. And so when we talked about engaging in evaluation, they thought that's what we were going to do. So it's very important from the very beginning to just unpack with young people what it is they think evaluation means. Um, and sometimes I even engage them in what does participatory evaluation means and begin to unpack that with them so that we can all get on the same page, just like I did with you earlier when I made the definitions. Another activity that's really awesome is called the Ultimate Chocolate Chip Cookie Activity. And you can really do this in a number of different ways, but chocolate chip cookies are good. Sometimes I use candy just in case you don't have chocolate chip cookies on hand. And the thing that's very fun about this is really getting them to begin to evaluate something right away. And in this instance, we're having them evaluate chocolate chip cookies and what is really good about the cookie and what good means, and having them get on the same page in terms of, is it the taste, is it the texture, is it the smell, is it the consistency? And so I have a little activity here that they can do that helps them really unpack how to assess something and how to come to the same set of criteria that they're all going to use to assess something. And again, this activity that I'm showing you right now, and you can follow these guidelines, is something you can do with cookies. The other way I've done it is with candy. And so I might have a bunch of candy on the table, different kinds and different shapes and different flavors. And then I have them group the candy just in their own grouping, however they want to do it on their own. And then I have them share why they grouped the candy the way that they did. And then I try to have them come to consensus about how we're going to collectively group the candy. So they can see that when you come to the table with a set of questions about what is good, that we all have different ways of seeing that and of evaluating that, and the importance of getting on the same page from the very beginning so that what we're looking at when we're looking at data or when we're looking at quality, we're all looking at the same thing. And I have them create rubrics and um, indicators for good or for just for candy, for what kinds of candy we're looking at. So they begin to see the various ways that you can really unpack that and begin to look at the way you sort something or the way you look at something. And you can follow these tips here for kind of doing that kind of activity. But it's a super fun thing to get young people engaged in right away that they can really sink their teeth into, excuse the pun, but then they can eat it, of course, after, which is really important, either the candy or the cookie. But it gets them understanding what is evaluation and um, and again, the real importance of us all looking at some phenomena or something all in the same way. Another really great activity is a storyboard logic model. And hopefully, if you've all been looking at evaluation, you understand a little bit about a logic model, which is a graphic representation of what your program is doing. Kind of what are the inputs or resources that you need to run the program? What are the activities that you need to be doing to drive short and long term outcomes? And the way I introduce this to young people is as a storyboard. And one of the things I have them do is to think about if it's a project that they themselves are running, I have them think about um, what does the community look like before they begin this project? What's going on? What's happening in the community? What's happening once they start their community project, and then what's happening when it's over? How has the community changed? When they're looking at a program or project that they're already in and are already involved in, that maybe they didn't define it isn't a youth-led program or project, it's something that they're just in, I often have young people start by telling me a story. The storyboard is, who are young people before they start in this program? What are they thinking about? What are they doing? What are they feeling? What's happening to them once they start the program? Why did they come there? What are they experiencing? What are they thinking, feeling, learning? And then when they leave, who do they think they'll be? How will they be changed by the project? What will they be thinking, feeling, experiencing differently? And so I have groups of youth create these storyboards on three sheets of paper where they can draw or mural or collage or anything like that, where they can just create a depiction of that. If there happens to be adults in the program, I often have adults create a story, a very similar story. And I'll tell you, I have the adults and youth share their stories of the program and what they think is happening. And I'll give you a fun example of how differently those stories can be told. So often I work with youth organizing groups. And so a typical story for youth organizing group from the adults is that before young people came to this program, they are bored. There's nothing going on in their lives. They're hanging out. They really don't have much in the way of adult supervision. They are interested in figuring out how to do something for their community. So they come to the program. They learn how to be social justice activists in the program. They gain a lot of skills around organizing and advocacy and how to use the arts as an organizing and advocacy tool. And then they leave the program and they go on to be Barack Obama and giant social change agents in the world. The same exact organization, the story the youth told was, before the young people came here, we were all in theater programs, we were in dance troupes, we were in community block parties performing, we were doing singing lessons, we were at the church doing singing in the chorus. Our lives were very full. We heard that this program would make us better performers and actors and artists. And so we came here and we began getting more performance skills and we began performing in the community and we got better and better at performance. And then we leave here and we're going to be Jay-Z and Lady Gaga. Now that's literally two stories that were told to me by a single organization. So from that moment, you can understand that how the youth would evaluate the program is wildly different than how the adults would evaluate it. And so from this point, you can either facilitate a conversation between the youth and the adults about, well, how could these stories be so different? In this instance, for example, the youth said, you want us to be community activists? Well, that wasn't at all clear to us, and you're not supporting us to become community activists, and we don't feel prepared at all to go out and do social justice work. So you're going to have to do a lot better if that's what you want the outcomes to be. And then what they also realized that they had some very different kinds of questions that they wanted to ask about the program, and they wanted to explore. So they went out and began doing peer-to-peer interviews about young people and their readiness to do social justice. And the adults took on another question and began asking their question and conducting their own study. I had other instances where adults tell very different stories from youth, and then they begin to shift and see how they can revise the program immediately to accommodate the youth storyline. So that storyboard activity can be extremely powerful as both just a planning tool, planning for how we're going to start the evaluation, but also just a good data collection tool from the very beginning, because this is great data about what young people think the program is all about, what they see the rationale for coming, what they see the activities, the most important activities to be, and the most important short-term outcomes, and what they see the most important long-term outcomes being of the work. Hopefully, the storyboard logic model will really help young people begin to think about the kinds of questions that they have about the programs that they're in, or the kinds of programs that they themselves are developing, and really helping youth think about, do they have questions about quality? Do they have questions about if youth see the program the same way as the adults do? Do they have questions about the outcomes of the work and how youth are impacted or how the community is impacted? So you really want to work with them to make sure that they've got questions in mind that they want to answer before they begin thinking about the kinds of methods that they want to use to address their questions. Um, I, again, in this handbook that I've created, there's a whole section on choosing the right methods, and there's some really awesome definitions of research methods that are written in child-friendly language. And then there's also this kind of cool table that has young people put each part of their storyboard in a box and ask questions about each element of the storyboard. So if the first element is who are they or who is the community before the project begins, they might have a lot of questions about, what does the community look like? What kinds of data would we need to gather to think about the community or ourselves, and what we came here needing, what we came here wanting. Once the program begins, the activities that they're involved in, are those the most important activities to youth? Are they the ones that resonate most with youth? Are they the ones that youth most enjoy and that are taking them toward the goals that they themselves have? And then as we move along, once they leave the program, are youth becoming who we hope they would become? Or once the community project is over, is the community becoming what we hope to become? And what kinds of data do we need to gather to make sure we're answering those questions? So that's just a little overview of the kinds of activities that I might engage young people in as I start to ignite or kick off a youth-led evaluation project. But there are lots of activities. I have this awesome toolkit that the USAID created that has a ton of activities, like some of the ones I just showed you. There's a hyperlink here that you can click on when you get the deck in your hands that will take you to the actual full handbook. And feel free to borrow or modify or change or make those your own. So I really am excited to hear the kinds of projects that you might engage in the future and to learn how your youth-led evaluation projects are going. But thank you for very much for having me join you. And I hope that one day I'll be able to meet you in person, but I hope your coursework goes really well and that you love youth-led evaluation as much as I do. So thanks so much for letting me join you. Bye.